The second community update for Baldur's Gate 3 since launch just came out, and in it they talk about the future of Baldur's Gate 3, including patch 2 and what happens after that. They say that patch 1 largely squashed a whole load of bugs and worked on some polish, and now they want to go further than that. This will be a relatively wordy update, but I'll have them on screen. We'll talk through it as we go. It's all pretty interesting stuff. They say that they find themselves at a time now where they're sort of looking beyond that. What should patch 2 include? They say it will include more bug fixes, a substantial quote-unquote performance improvement, multiple of those, for the first time since launch. And more notably, they're also adding better closure to the story's final arc in the form of a more fleshed out ending for Karlach, something many people have indeed been asking for. They then also directly address some criticism around cut content. They say, before we get ahead of ourselves, let's take a moment to address some conversation that's being had in the background. Many of the points that come out of the conversation are funneled under the term cut content, so they thought it would be helpful to give us some clarity about that, and we think reflect on the future of Baldur's Gate 3. So they've segmented and divided the discussion into 3 different parts: performance, bugs, and user experience. Starting with performance, they say the city of Baldur's Gate itself is ambitious, technically, narratively, and in scope. One of the biggest issues with creating games is that technology is always trying to keep up with ambition, and they've been hit pretty hard with some setbacks, they say. They say that they know Act 3's performance is not good, or not as good as the first 2 acts, I should say. But the good news is that patch 2 is bringing major performance improvements to the entire game, but more specifically to Act 3, where you will feel it the most. So if you're some of the more dedicated players out there bursting your way through Act 3, this will in particular be good news for you. They continue to say we'll also be working throughout September to improve performance in Act 3 further with new technology that's taking a bit longer to release than they expected. So overall good news on the performance front. We expect to see improved performance across the board with a particular focus on the meatier, at least when it comes to technical ambition, Act 3 and the city of Baldur's Gate, etc. that surrounds that. Sticking with the theme of Act 3 a little bit, next they talk about bugs. They say they've seen reports about Act 3 and that they're as frustrated as we are by bugs spoiling the experience. They say that they're dedicated to solving these quickly, and as you've noticed by their hotfix and patch rollout, they're getting through them pretty fast, and to their credit, they have released a lot of those. They move on to say that patch 2 looks to further eliminate some of the more major issues, including those found in Act 3. Some things that are currently being associated with cut content are actually things like companion reactions to events in the world that don't trigger. These are being solved, so there are sort of more bug issues. Where there seem to be loose ends, they're trying to tie them up. So some good news as well inside of this bugs section. And before we move on to a more sort of detailed look at the future, the final section here is about user experience. They say that it covers a lot of things. How it feels to play the game. How you feel when you're playing it. Wow. Broad. Baldur's Gate 3 is a game 3 years in early access and 6 years in the making. They say many of the building blocks, ideas, tests, however you want to refer to the junk data that falls outside of what's shipped with, can and is being data mined. They say that's okay, but it's important to understand that not every building block in the giant box of Lego is needed to create the experience we ultimately envisioned and intended over years of iteration. In other words, there's quite a bit of crap lying around out the back, we're not necessarily using it all. Diving into the cut content thing just a little bit more, they say that the first references to cut content is just because stuff isn't triggering properly because of a bug, as we just talked about. For instance, some of Minthra's activities. They've located what's causing it and they're working on it, so we should expect a fix soon. The second is about the epilogue, the end, post-end. What's been data mined is not really cut content, but content that they didn't want to release because they didn't think it worked. They're pretty strict, they say, with themselves around their ideas. If it isn't good, if it isn't fun to play, it doesn't make it into the game. One of the reasons why they trimmed the epilogue is because they were afraid the ending cinematics were becoming too long and would detract from the epicness of the experience, but clearly, not everybody agrees with them, so they're doing something about it. They've started expanding the epilogues, and we'll see the first results of that in the next patch, Patch 2, with the addition of a new optional ending for Karlach. It's fiery, poignant, and gives her the ending she deserves, they say. And then the third and final thing, they talk about things that they didn't plan for or things that they once considered but ultimately didn't do. And I won't go through this part word for word, but they basically reflect on the city of Baldur's Gate 3, how massive it is. They intend it to be this sort of epic cinematic place. Not everything that they developed for it necessarily got into it. And they continue to talk about how Baldur's Gate 3 is a game of many release dates, came a few years late, teams grow, ambition changes. Not every idea makes it into the final launch, and they're ultimately glad with how it's resonated with people overall. Then, crucially, they move through and ask, so, what can you expect from us in the future? And it boils down to three things. Firstly, and very simply, they say that they'll keep on monitoring bugs that we encounter, and they'll make sure to patch them as fast as they can. Again, a combination, of course, of hotfix updates as well as more major patch updates. We've heard quite a bit already in this about Patch 2. Second, they say that they'll start making improvements based on the feedback that we're giving them, kind of flowing on from the first. Baldur's Gate 3 means a great deal to us, that's true, and in turn it means the world to them. They say they love the game, they're not done with it yet, they welcome feedback, threads, and words of encouragement. And then the third point, which again kind of just flows on from the first and second, this is Withers' wardrobe of wayward friends. Withers. Love it. Love it. Which they hope to launch very soon. They say it's an example of what they just talked about integrating feedback. This wardrobe feature allows you to get rid of co-op party members who join your campaign, so you can continue on without them. They're also working on the ability to change your character's look once you've started the campaign. That will, I'm sure, be music to many people's ears. So it's not just a wardrobe to shove your co-op party friends into once they're standing there AFK, but also potentially an opportunity for us to change the way that we look, though they don't yet have a release date planned for that. There will be more, and we can expect them to come with modding support as well in the future. To conclude and kind of wrap everything up, they thank everyone for feedback, say it's a motivating driving factor. They say they've been asked if we're going to be patching in the cut content. They think they understand where the question comes from now. And they're going to be looking at Act 3, figuring out how to make the final act and epilogue land in a stronger way. And there's more on that. Karlach's new ending, performance fixes as we've discussed, and their event trigger solutions are the first step to doing that, and all of those things will be coming with Patch 2. They also have an internal version of what they're calling the Withers' wardrobe of wayward friends, as we talked about, which they hope to launch, quote, very soon. The feature will, of course, as we just discussed, allow us to get rid of co-op party members who join our campaign so that we can carry on without them. And they're working on the ability for us to change the way we look as well, but don't have a release date for that. They conclude by saying there's lots to do, lots to play, and Baldur's Gate 3 means a great deal. They loved the game, they're not done with it yet, as they've expressed with the patches. They continue to like our words of encouragement. And that, my friends, concludes today's Baldur's Gate 3 community update, the second one since launch. I think it's given us some reasonable insights into what to expect on Patch 2, more content, less just to focus on bug fixes, which is great to see, and of course a little bit of a look into their future philosophy, i.e. they continue to keep working on this big bad boy. Thanks for joining me, I'll see you next time.